Okay, welcome to Thought Garden on the Air, where we explore the stories, strategies, and skills that shape the most compelling personal brands and talented professionals today. I'm your host, Alexis Quintal, CEO and owner of Rosarium, a personal branding and public relations firm dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, business leaders, and influencers monetize and elevate their personal brands. So, for season two, we're expanding beyond our focus of authors and into the broader world of personal branding. So, whether you're an entrepreneur, influencer, or an expert, we're here to help amplify your voice. So, today I'm speaking with Alexis Muellner, another friendly Alexis here, editor in chief of the Tampa Bay Business Journal and a longstanding leader in American journalism. With over 2 decades at the helm of one of Florida's most influential business publications, Alexis brings a unique perspective on storytelling, credibility, and visibility in the media landscape. So, welcome, Alexis. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Alexis. I don't get a chance to say that so
I
often.
know, it's kind of
It's
weird.
a little weird, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's nice to be with you.
of course. So let's start in the beginning, right? Your journey
Mhm.
in media, from what I learned from your bio, started very young. So what was that experience like? What sparked that passion?
Well, I grew up in I was sort of 7 years old in 1969, so I can figure out my age. I'm 62. So somebody put a camera, and it's a Kodak Instamatic camera in my hands, and at a very young age, and it was around me. My mom was creative, and so once I got into photography and loved that, and then was taken into a dark room and watched, images come up out of developer, and the whole world of making photographs was really my start. But I, at the same time, as a very young person, did drama and theater. In a new. I grew up in Boston, so it was a new, at the time, a new, now very established private school called Fairweather Street School. But I was there the first couple of years, and there was drama classes and theater, and so I then parlayed that into some work in television. There was a couple of shows on WBZ Boston that I worked on as a young person, and got a chance to sort of get a feel for that whole world. And was always interested in video and TV production, and so it set a path for what has been a multimedia life. I mean, it's just I love it. I like that I have. Eventually fell into public radio, and we can sort of, not in a non-linear way, talk about the progression. But started very early, just being somebody who liked media, and whether or not
Mhm.
that was taking the lead or just being creative, it's always been a passion of mine.
Mhm. Well, I love that. From what you just shared, we have so many similarities. I'm also from Boston.
I don't think I knew
Also,
that.
I know, I don't know if we talked about that, so that's kind of funny. Same
Yeah,
name from Boston. I also was in, my high school's newspaper. I also was in media very early and studied journalism in college. So, yeah, I have a similar
great,
path. So it's always
very
interesting to
cool.
see, though, where you kind of end up. So,
Yeah, it's a do what you love thing too, right? I mean,
yeah.
once you, and especially because it's fun. I mean, I think that's a big part of do what you love, the money will follow. I think that's somewhat
Hmm.
true. But
Hmm.
yeah, for me, it was all about that, and I got lucky. I got some very good, interesting projects early on as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, from your experiences in, radio and journalism, was there anyone that in particular that influenced your kind of path as a journalist?
A lot of people, as a very young person, there's a woman named Gail Levine who worked at WBZ in Boston, and actually brought me, who I met as a young person in that private school. And um, I think you know, she was just fostered a lot of, just awareness, opportunity,
Mm.
and later went on to work in New York in a whole range of different media stuff. Unfortunately, she passed a few years ago, but then just lots of folks along the way. People who were in my life. It's hard to pinpoint one or two.
Yeah.
I think I went to undergrad at Hampshire College in Western Massachusetts, and was lucky enough to find a recording of a pirate radio show from Vietnam, which was
Wow.
at the time, but this is several years before Robin Williams starred in Good Morning Vietnam, and it was a cassette recording. I'd been a disc jockey I've always liked sound and working in music and sound and mixing mixtapes and sound and things like that. And so this recording had been passed along among veterans, and nobody really knew its source. It was called Radio First Termer, and it was 90 minutes of of hard acid rock music, but punctuated by a DJ who was very polished, and the commentary was all very anti-war, unauthorized, not impromptu, sort of slick, polished. And it was fascinating, blew my mind. And I went and did my senior thesis at Hampshire on the role of radio in Vietnam. And through that, in the course of the process of making connections with just a ton of former Vietnam War correspondents, and we ended up with a series on NPR about the role of radio in Vietnam, which was really three pillars, which is one being this, our official channels of armed forces radio, which were very sort of sanitized and portrayed a whole different picture of what the reality of people who were serving there saw. And then secondly, on the use of unauthorized, equipment to either alleviate boredom and tension by broadcasting to each other on certain channels, or in the case of one guy who brought a turntable in his plane and would broadcast Louie Louie to his fellow pilots, and so it was a dream project because nobody really had explored that. The third piece was propaganda, which is where you had, Psy-war operators who were trying to help their effort on both sides to, disrupt psychologically, and there was a lot of issues around that in Vietnam. And so, it was a fascinating project. And so through that, a collaborative in Boston called Interlock Media was my home for a while. We got a lot of grant money, and ended up being a series of 4 NPR on radio in Vietnam that aired in Veterans Day in 1987. Got a chance to spend an hour with Robin Williams in the Carlisle Hotel for that project. He was going to host it, but the timing didn't work. And so, having had some experiences like that, Barry Levinson, who's the director, I got a chance to spend an hour with him, and just those kinds of things as a young person, having a project that was really compelling. So anyway, yeah. So lots of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's going to be a lot of people, that impacted along the way. So very interesting. And so, as you're probably aware, with Rosarium, we help kind of teach people about personal branding and, how to help shape the narrative. So, and that's something you do every day. I don't know if you've really thought about it like that, but have you ever thought or defined your own personal brand?
I thought this is a really interesting question because, we at the Tampa Bay Business Journal, I'm the editor-in-chief and have been here for 21 years almost, which is remarkable to me. And so it's been an opportunity to establish that brand. And I would answer that in a couple of ways. It's very important to us for our reporters to have their brands. And that's been a phenomenon in the last 10 years, I think, about making sure that they are out in our community and that people know them. And I guess that's the way I would define it is consistent behavior, accessibility, willingness to engage, listen. A lot of news organizations are not characterized as having a degree of humility, and it's one thing to say, "Oh, I'm a humble person," but or I have humility, and it's another to really act it out. And so, and sort of define by actions that you're willing to hear people and that you believe in helping people understand how to help you. And that's certainly been my relationship with the public relations world. Is I say yes to every invite to go talk to PRSA, for example, or other practitioners, because you guys are in the position of having to help clients understand why we're not going to jump on their 19 consecutive quarters of growth. That's not news for the Business Journal. And so articulating our value proposition is a big part of that, helping businesses grow, leveling the playing field, identifying people who to work with and those not to, and also calling, holding people accountable to their actions. So the brand for me is all about, who I am as a creative, I have other pursuits. I continue, 95,000 photographs on my iPhone. That's true. And people around me, especially those where I chair, my volunteer work is as chairman of the board of the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts,
Oh,
FMOPA.org. It's not the most easy acronym, but it's been around for 25 years. But I've been on the board for about 8 years, chair for about 6. It's a struggling, not struggling. It struggles to maintain sustainable funding, but
yeah,
it's an established institution. It moved to Ybor City here in Tampa 2 years ago. It's been in several locations. It needs long-term support because it's the kind of asset that helps make placemaking important. So my brand's associated with that creative work, being really open and accessible to all folks, and understanding diversity is so important. And so, my photographic work is also my brand, and you
yeah.
can see that on Instagram. My name. I have a
Okay.
really large body of work. I'm not sure, if you knew that, but it's a big focal point for me. I post there as an art portfolio, and it's just
Hmm.
a bunch of different sort of areas of work. So it adds to this whole combination of being not satisfied with one channel of media. And I photograph a
Right.
lot for us. I mean, these days you can have a phone around your neck and shoot a lot. So I know I'm answering
Yeah.
these questions sort of all over the place, but the fact is that I think a personal brand is all those things. It's how
Right.
people perceive you. It's reputation, it's track record, it's consistency, it's accessibility, and that's what makes up mine.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned things. A lot of people do, when I ask about their personal brand, they do just heavily focus on their, day-to-day job. And of course that's a piece of it, but it's only really one piece of the pie, or the graph of like who you are as a person.
Yeah,
So
I'm
as a
grateful. I'm so
creative.
very blessed about that too, Alexis. I mean, I
Mhm.
think I don't know. It's rich. It makes for a
Yeah.
rich experience.
Yeah, and it makes it you more relatable too, right? Like most people can relate to the other pieces of your pie outside of your career, and they want to know those little bits and pieces
Yeah,
about
that's
you.
nice. It's nice to hear. I think I would want that to be the case. I mean,
Yeah,
and I don't take it for granted, but
absolutely. Well, so you talked a little bit too about what type of a pitch wouldn't really be the right fit for the business journal. So are there any like elements that, business leaders could consider when they are crafting a pitch that you would actually want to tell?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, our focus at the Business Journal here in Tampa Bay, we have 4 of us in Florida. We're part of a national company, American City Business Journals, and in many markets in the country. And we have similar realities, but they're different in that we're hyper local, and we're interested in things that, and this is the basic definition of business news: something you didn't know and are surprised to hear. Something you
Mm,
didn't know and are surprised to hear. It's as simple as that. We operate
yeah.
under the notion of news urgency, and so we once were just a print edition that came out on Friday. We'd have to put the paper to bed on a Monday. We hope that would not break the stories till Friday. The world has changed. We
Yeah,
tell people what we know when we know it. We have a
exactly.
team of experienced reporters who work a beat, and we want to be proactive versus being reactive. And that's not the easiest thing for folks in PR to understand, because they want us to pick up the releases and rewrite them a little bit, and just do that. But those
Mm,
are great things to have, and there are moments where, as the euphemism of the hungry bear, we need content, but we want to provide context and sophisticated, thoughtful reporting, and ask questions. And so, the key is exclusivity. We've had a lot of debate about whether or not to label things exclusive. Sometimes readers don't really care, because if the content is strong enough, if the stories are well thought out, they're deeply sourced, they have numbers to back them up, and the headlines are good, then our readers have to have them. And we're in a moment in time where we have deep metrics and goals, almost like a
mhm.
sales organization,
Oh yeah,
that where for goals for visits, for conversions, for folks to see the article, click on it, hit a paywall, and subscribe. That means they have to have it. And
yeah,
so on our side, it means understanding, and it's a tricky science, what folks want. And it
yeah.
generally has been, big real estate deals and
True.
transactional work, but
Hmm.
a lot of that gets controlled by press releases. But it comes through relationships. It comes through
Right.
building rapport. And I think, we, and I'll finish rambling in a second, but I think it's about the ability to connect with people. And, I've known a lot of introverted journalists who won a few who won Pulitzers that I'm thinking of. And they probably did some longer term work or did the kind of reporting and work that suited their personalities. But big dailies have been decimated. We compete with them very heavily, but we care about our colleagues, and we care about people monitoring, keeping people honest and leveling the playing field and things like that. So to answer your question, it's about being able to tell stories with great art and visuals, and to find the angles that people are missing, and break news. I mean, and we negotiate for scoops all the time, in part so that we can do, not follow the herd, but then have the time under an embargo perhaps to do the reporting ahead of time and make those stories very strong.
Right, you get to be the one to break it, right? Of course, that's always the goal.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to the thing about sort of whether or not anybody cares, but they do care, because I think we've learned is, especially, and I know podcasts are global in a lot of ways, so hello to our viewers in other countries. I hope you're there. But for the folks here in our region in Tampa Bay, there is the Tampa Bay Times, which has a storied, independent, storied tradition, and has had suffered in terms of, having to lose people and resources. And, but the fact is that a lot of folks now, with the loss of the Tampa Tribune here a couple of years ago, have looked to us, the Tampa Bay Business Journal, to fill in some of that gap. We're a business to business newspaper, so we're not covering the same things as a daily circulation paper would, but we also have the chance with a tenured staff to develop the rapport with those business leaders, help train them. And we do this all the time. How do you get people to tell you something maybe they shouldn't, but we protect our sources, but we want to, to break those stories, to your point, Alexis. I think scoops are important in that way. But the goal is to make sure that, there's something there, that the business lens is very clear, and that there's actionable, items and feedback for people to build on.
Hold on one second. My husband just came home for lunch.
Not to worry.
Okay. Just letting him know.
Not to worry. You're good.
Perfect. So I like what you're saying too about, journalism is becoming more and more of a business. It was a business before, but now it's even become more, competitive and difficult to have those kinds of resources. So how do you has it shifted how you would like mentor other journalists with that kind of business mindset?
Well, sure. I think it's a different animal for the business reporters, and
Right.
we have a range of experience levels on our staff. But in the more recent years, we've hired folks who have come out of school, and that didn't used to be. We were generally more a second or third job in terms of the career hierarchy. So they have to have an interest in business, and that's part of it. But they really have to have an interest in people, because people, one of our adages is that businesses don't make business news, people do. And so it's being able to connect and develop those relationships, in part because it's so reputational. When we write stories about conflict, which is often a driver of news stories. But for example, if it's a lawsuit, we don't just write that the lawsuit's been filed because it's unproven allegations. If we're going to do that, then we're going to talk about the facts of the case and why they matter. So it's helping our journalists understand the business lens. Every piece needs to have that to it, a business to business lens. And so it takes a while for some folks, depending on their training, to understand that piece. And what's our value proposition? What are our readers really looking for? And how do you structure a story, very very high in the piece, to tell them, why this matters. Why do we care? It's a pretty common tenet of good journalism to in your stories, very high in the stories, to say, this is why we're doing this. This is why you should continue to read to the end. So, and it's bringing, for the most part, several voices or sources to it, and then having numbers and stories. Those are the things that in business journalism are a little bit more unique to the craft, and that not only is it important to have those in the stories, but when you're dealing with issues of reputation, we will write tough stories, but we also have to understand that those relationships will continue down the line. So we want to be mindful of that, and make sure that they're fair and accurate and not and not undersourced.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting to how the media world has changed, which we've kind of talked about a little bit. So have you had to pivot your approach to storytelling or leadership?
What's changed in most recent time is just the digital world and the speed
Mhm.
for which news travels, right?
Right.
And I don't think that's not new news. We actually went to a digital first strategy, about more than 10 years ago now. So that's back to the telling people what you know when you know it. And we operate as a daily news operation. We have a newsletter that goes out in the morning that's free for people to sign up to, and it's our morning edition, and then we have an afternoon edition. And so we're telling you twice a day what's happening. And those newsletters are very important because we want them to be different. We want them to have new content in them all the time. And so we also have a whole pillar of the Business Journal's work, which is events and being a connector. And I host roundtables among CEOs a lot, and we take that content and put it in the paper. So it's probably what's changed most is just being in a growth market has facilitated crazy pace, and it's a lot of work, but I'm grateful for it. I'm not. It's not a complaint in any way. It's just I could work would not stop. So finding balance and career work life integration. It's not about work life balance anymore. Is part of it, but you have to be committed to that and really dig it and have some fun along the way. But I think what we're really trying to do is help our team write those enterprise stories, meaning they create they develop the ideas and don't again, proactive versus reactive. We will see something and find another angle that's really compelling that hasn't been told, and that takes brain power and work. And so I think what's really important to know is that it's not stuff you can just pull out of the air.
Right. Absolutely. Right. You have to keep that integrity, make sure all the information is accurate. Right.
All of that, all of
We've
those
all
things.
heard the term.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, and you mentioned some different like events and roundtables. Is there anything exciting coming up this year that you could share?
Oh, I mean, we do, there's an annual calendar. And so, we just, in March, we did our Business Woman of the Year, which is our annual big event. And,
Oh yeah, that
you know,
looked
what,
amazing.
it was fantastic. It's our biggest event of the year. Our 40 under 40 is in the fall.
Yeah. Right.
And what happens is that anybody can nominate people for those.
Hmm.
Uh, and then they have to submit a more detailed packet. And years ago, we'd bring in outside people to judge, and we abandoned that. And then we named categories, and people would have to come and buy a table, and it was all a little, thin. And now, in the last 7 or 8 years, that's all changed. We judge them internally, including our publisher, and we sit down and read through these packets. In the case of 40 under 40, it's hundreds of them because there are
Wow.
a lot of
Yeah, I can
people.
imagine.
Very hard
That's
to win
impressive.
that. And they're coveted. People really, they mean something to people in part. And then we tell people why these people are being honored. And so we name all the honorees
Right.
at once. We also have our Power 100 list of the biggest influencers that came out in March. But that we ask all those people to tell us who their most admired CEOs are. It's a program we started last year, and so we'll be doing that again. And it identifies the people, all the top influencers. Who do they follow? Who do they think they're? It's a brilliant idea on the part of our publisher,
It is. I
I
like
know
that.
it's been great. And so, one thing that is a focus of mine is diversity and making sure that
Hmm.
our pages reflect it, both cultural, locational, age, all the things, and especially in this moment in time when it's under attack for reasons for which baffle me. I mean, I understand them, but I just it's discouraging. And so, with the events specifically, especially pathways for Black-owned businesses, people of color, to realize that when they when they enter these things, and then we're not judging it, we're judging based on the words we see,
Right.
but that could be leveraged for those folks if they are honored to to build their brand and their business. And so, we've seen some real progress, especially with businesswomen. The year before last was the most diverse class I'd ever seen, in part because of that daily intent about engaging certainly in the Black community, business community, and Latino business community, and trying to help people understand who may not be familiar with the Business Journal, all the connecting points and the places for which being a subscriber, having access through the paywall, and taking part in our events really pays off.
Right. Yeah, you're building those relationships in the community, so it just naturally has become a very diverse group, and that's Tampa as well. We're very lucky to be in this city.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Years ago, Tampa was not like that, and I spent many years in Miami, and there was definitely an old boys network, and it was discouraging. And even when I got here in 2004, that still existed. But when you have lots of people who enter the community from different places, they bring their intellectual assets, they help the growth, and then it becomes hopefully a place of more depthful opportunity, and for people to build social capital and have a seat at the table.
Absolutely. So where can someone follow along with you and with TBBJ?
Oh goodness,
direct
easy to find me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And to the earlier point about the brand, I'm accessible. I have to sort of filter out. There's only so much time in the day, and I'm a manager, and so I'm a content producer. So I leverage and balance all that. So to answer your question, certainly A Muellner at the business at Biz Journals, amuellner at bizjournals, A Muellner at Biz Journals. There's an N in there. And then on Instagram, it's my whole name at Alexis Muellner. And the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts is fmopa.org. I've got a really cool project. I'm curating an exhibition in November.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Cool. Where will this be?
I know, my goodness. It's a collaboration with my wife, who's a graphic designer, and it's called The Soldier's Lens, and we're going to open submissions soon. It was inspired by one of my wife's clients who served in Vietnam, is a business guy, but served in Vietnam, had a trove of images back to Vietnam. And we wondered what to do with them, but we decided to open it up. If you served in the theater of war anytime after World War II and liked photography and have images to share, we're going to be opening submissions for that at fmopa.org very soon. Wow. And so we're going to curate that into an exhibition and then have events over Veterans Day. And then it could be curriculum and catalog and everybody. And this is a military community. I mean, MacDill is here. And but I think this could be, I'm going to start hitting the road and asking, enlisted and officers to find, who, and video. So it's, we don't know what we're going to get. So it's super cool.
Yeah. That's so exciting.
So, yeah, it's very exciting. So we'll see.
It seems like almost like a full circle moment.
And go to the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts website and submit some photos. So who knows? That should be happening.
Sure. Yeah. I'll put all these links in
yeah. Did I give you enough places to contact? I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
On the TampaBayBusinessJournal.com is our website. Yeah. People will hit a paywall, but see an article you like, subscribe to it. We love our subscribers. We need subscribers. Yeah. We're not a nonprofit.
Right. That's how you can support local journalism as well.
100%.
Appreciate that. Well, with that, we conclude another episode of The Thought Garden. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and social media for more inspiring stories and actionable insights. If you have a story to share or you know someone who does, you can reach out to us at rosarium.work or on our socials. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Thought Garden.
Thank you for having me.